Welcome to the Marketing Remix, presented by Red Door Interactive. I'm Reed Carr, CEO of Red Door Interactive. Our show is a senior-level marketer's resource for navigating our ever-evolving landscape. In each episode, in about 20 minutes, experts from different marketing disciplines representing different buyer touchpoints tackle one important marketing topic. Then, what do you need to know, and how does it affect the buyer? We're here to talk about preparing for life in a voice-first world, which is the second part of a two-part series. So we've already talked about where we have been, and this is where we're going. So in our last episode, we talked about the arrival of the voice-first movement, covering the current landscape for voice technology and some of the immediate implications for marketers. In part two of this series, we shift our focus to the future. In this episode, we'll discuss the future of voice technology, the impact of voice commerce, ways to future-proof your website, and finally, we answer the question, will voice kill the website? Which is a little scary, I think. We're here with Ron Hadler, our Senior Director of Marketing Technology, and Ross Briggs, our Manager of SEO here at Red Door Interactive. Thanks for joining us, guys.
Great to be here.
Yeah, thanks for coming again. It's a lot to talk about with Voice First. I think so many people are engaged with talking to their devices and all the different things that we could be doing. But before we jump back into the tactical discussion, let's talk about voice commerce, because people want to think about how are we going to start selling stuff on there. We talked last time about how people are just finding things and how we need to build sites to get people to our content and our brand. But has voice become a sales channel in its own right? I mean, what do we think the future holds for voice-powered sales?
Yeah, so even right now, so 2017 saw $1.8 billion versus e-commerce sales through the voice channel, primarily driven by Alexa. That's the closest contact to that purchasability. That number is going to grow over the next few years up to $40 billion worth of sales. And that's really just looking at direct purchases that take place via voice. So I think the bigger implication is really as consumers get more used to this technology and it becomes more integrated into their lives, they start to also do product research. And that has a big implication for that final purchase that might take place online via desktop or mobile, or maybe in person at a brick and mortar location.
Yeah, so I think that people are naturally gravitate toward the Alexa app and say, hey, I'm just going to reorder something or something. That's pretty easy to be doing. But it's a little different behavior in some of the other devices. Last episode, we talked a little bit about the differences between like an Alexa device and a Google device, or maybe even Siri. How do we see all the different aspects of voice tech evolving into the future? How is it different device to device, watches, phones, and, the Alexas of the world? I don't know even what you call that, I guess, home speakers of some sort. How's that evolving, you think, into the future?
Just to go back a little bit to commerce, I think one of the things that's sort of evolving with, because, even as good as Alexa is for e-commerce, I don't know who all these people are buying things without seeing them. And, it's like, because even like a pair of socks, it's like, is that scratchy? Is that soft? Is that thick enough? All these things that you just can't just do through voice, no matter, how good it is. So I think that, really the evolution of pairing a screen with these speakers. Yeah. And so it becomes no longer just, the voice, it becomes voice as interface, right? Yeah. So you are navigating the digital world via a voice navigation. So that's really kind of one of the ways that we're moving forward with voice, is that the interface is voice. Sort of Star Trek, not Star Wars.
Oh no, that's a whole different battle.
And we've got these devices around us right now, and some people have the Google Home in their house, and we've got voice interaction with our phones. But as we see this growth of the Internet of Things, there are connected devices all around us, and maybe it's your refrigerator in your kitchen that can then take a shopping list by you speaking to it. It can be, your watch, as you mentioned. It can be interactions within your car as you're driving. Healthcare is a huge place where Internet of Things is taking off. One example being in-home elder monitoring and making sure that if they fall or something like that, that they can be taken care of. And so as more of these surround us and people become more comfortable with voice, it's easier just to make that natural interaction and not say, I'm going to go to my computer and do a search. You just start speaking and the search is happening around us. And I think one more future-looking thing, when you see people wearing the virtual reality headsets, they're not typically sitting at a computer doing it, right? They're interacting with the world around them naturally, and that uses voice.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. I mean, getting comfortable with it, because some of the awkwardness I've experienced is the people around me if I'm going to have a conversation with a device. And that's another thing. I think we've started to humanize our devices a little bit more. I mean, obviously they put names like a Siri or Alexa or something that's tried to make it a little more human. I think the voices themselves are getting more and more human and less computery. So perhaps that's some of it, is just the cultural norm and how that's going to evolve and change.
How many times have you said thank you after you've gotten an answer from the speaker?
I was taught to be very polite, so almost always I think I say thank you.
It's one of those interesting things. And so in understanding that, they're actually evolving the voice devices to understand politeness. And because what's really popular is these devices with kids.
Yeah.
And so they're now being trained to be more polite in interacting with this, because the computer at right now doesn't really care whether you're mean, nice, angry. It's just going to give you the answer. And so being able to actually, enforce good behavior is now happening through the interactions.
That'll be interesting. I wonder if it'll start to infer and understand tone. We haven't really talked about that, and maybe that's where some of the stuff will be heading to. If the urgency with which someone is asking a question, or some of the background environment, or things last time we talked a little bit about use cases, something happening in the gym is different than, so from a geolocation standpoint, than something that happens in a kitchen. So these devices obviously getting smarter and smarter, and voice being the interface to have that conversation. So
one of the most exciting things about voice, and I think that it conveys so much more, right? And, I don't care how many emojis somebody puts on something, it doesn't convey emotion.
Yeah.
And so voice
emojis do.
Voice does convey emotions very, very well, whether that's, inflection, volume, all of that comes through very, very closely. And so it's really one of those points where you can get sentiment personalization via voice. So understanding and delivering comment, whether somebody's coming and asking for content, whether they're angry, happy, sad, or excited about your content.
So if we're talking about how we how these devices are going to feel or sense how you're feeling, and adding screens to it, and all the different ways this content is then going to be engaged with, and how it's going to manifest, how can brands start to future-proof what is today now a website and apps and things like that? How can they future-proof their sites and content for a voice-first world?
So yeah, and I got into that a little bit in the very end of our last podcast, and talking about content engineering, and really this is the concept of really applying engineering principles to your content. And the reason you do that is twofold. Is one, just well-engineered content is easy for a content publisher to get it out there, which means frictionless publishing. That's really important in this day, a fast turnaround things, but also it removing your styling, your all of those different things that an HTML that comes in with content. A lot of content mentions, they tend to kind of mix that. So well-engineered content removes that. And so what this does is you just kind of get pure content. And the advantage of having pure content is then it's going to serve not only in the voice first world, but whatever the next iteration beyond voice. Because, we are doing this before we had mobile, then we had a watch, then voice, and whatever's next. I'm just thinking and it comes to me. It's still delivering the content is really kind of what it is. And so having content by itself is really it.
Can you break apart a little bit the word content? And when you say stripping it all away, what is left when you're talking about content? It's not just words, or is it just words?
Not just words, but I mean, it's really kind of, it's just use the word content type. So robust content type. So let's just think of a blog article as a content type. So a blog article has a title. It has the body. It has maybe a picture associated with it. It might even have a summary associated with it. So that's pure content. Now that body does not have HTML in it. Now it can have things like bullets, or it can have things like paragraph breaks. That stuff actually translates. The robots that speak and understand that will understand those sort of things, but it won't understand HTML like header or div. those things will really mess up your content. So making sure that you can deliver pure content is part of future proofing, because then no matter what form the internet takes in the future, your content is able to be delivered.
So that breaking it apart like that then changes maybe its discoverability or how people search for it and get it back. Ross, maybe talk a little bit about future-proofing it from that perspective.
Yeah, I think one of the things that we have to be aware of is sort of as these new technologies pick up and gain popularity, there's often a lot of hype around them. And sometimes the hype predates the actual impact that comes later. But what Ron's talking about with, quality content engineering, that's something that's beneficial for your website now, but also future-proofs you for voice interactions later. And sort of one thing we talked about in the previous episode was those featured snippets and using structured data on your website to win more featured snippets. So there's a few new types of featured snippets that were recently approved by Google for usage. One is an FAQ way to mark up that content for here was the question and then here were the submitted answers. Maybe it's through a forum or could just be FAQ like customer service questions, things like that. There's also a how-to schema markup that you can leverage. And then there's also a Q&A. So using these now can win you featured snippets in search and can get you improved click-through rate on mobile and desktop, as we've been talking about, but also future-proofs you for voice. And so it's sort of a two-pronged strategy that improves how you're doing now and future-proofs you as well.
So that's interesting too. Now, I mean, as we're adapting this, the devices have changed. Ron alluded to, the shift from how websites to all the way down to the form factor of a watch or something to that effect. So, and we started this whole conversation around commerce and how it moves toward transactions. So how do you guys see this moving more toward transactions via those different kinds of interfaces? I mean, is it we're doing a search and then there's a sequence of events that may happen that ends with this kind of voice response mechanism where it's more like a conversation? Today, it feels a lot more like I ask a question, I get a response, and I'm done. It gives maybe some further content, but what's this dialogue start to look like?
That's the exciting part. And maybe I'm going to steal Ross's thunder here, but Google just this summer had at their I/O had a duplex, which is now rolling out to 6 cities here shortly. And it is the ability for an assistant to start making calls and making appointments for you. And they demonstrated, you can find this up on YouTube, is where an AI robot dialed up a hairdresser and made an appointment. And the interaction was so real that the live human on the other end taking the appointment information did not realize it was a robot speaking and making, because there was pauses, there was ums. And so it was just unbelievably not to be able to tell. Now, for some place like California here where we're at, is it illegal or against the law to actually record conversations? And the only way that robots can actually respond to you is they record what you say, translate it, and then respond based upon their translation of that. And so in California, it'll be like, hi, I'm Jim, Ron Hadler's AI robot. I'm here to make an appointment for his beard.
And then you have to get approval that it's okay to record that call and have that dialogue.
They'll
perhaps.
have that kind of confirmation.
So, and I assume that then that gets into then trying to make changes to policy or something as from a government standpoint to make sure that this stuff can continue to progress, or people will just ask for forgiveness, do this anyway, and Google will ask for forgiveness later as consumers have adopted it and love having it that way. So,
and to jump in on the commerce piece of it, as we're talking about this evolution from just a simple voice search application to more of the idea of personal assistance, I think as the personal assistant learns more about you and sort of understands your shopping behavior and you're looking to plan a trip, the personal assistant knows, do you pick the cheapest hotel or do you pick the, sort of resort style hotel? Are you looking generally for a first class plane ticket or are you happy with coach, And as that sort of learns more about you and knows your preferences, and we start to layer in things like AI and machine learning to sort of save that information, people become more secure with the purchase that's happening on their behalf through these personal assistants. And that's actually one of the biggest hurdles to get over is people saying, okay, well, I'm okay with interacting and doing skills and asking questions, but I'm not so sure about making a purchase because that's when my wallet's involved. And all of a sudden, am I going to get a 30 pack of paper towels or am I going to end up with 300 paper towels, right? That's probably overkill. But once people do make that initial first purchase and they see that it does work out, they're much more likely to make future purchases versus that first one.
Yeah, so people's behaviors are changing as they get more and more comfortable with that, and we're going to have to start seeing that happen more and more. So we're going to adapt content, and as we're talking about content engineering, so is voice technology going to kill the website as we know it?
No, but artificial intelligence might.
Oh, okay. I knew there was a catch.
So voice is going to be sort of amplified, and Ross can speak to this, is kind of like when mobile came on and how that was kind of affecting websites and web searches. But really with voice technology, you're not going to see the death of the website. But if you are prepared for it, you will take advantage when AI comes along, because people will probably stop visiting your website because they will not have to. Your curated, your assistant will go and get curated content for you. And if your website is structured and such that they can find the right content, they'll bring it back and they'll curate it. They'll take that content and mash it with other things, giving the person who owns that robot choices about what they want to do. They'll answer those questions. So it's curated content delivered by AI is what will kill the website as we know it today.
And then they'll receive, the way I'm hearing it, then receive it the way they want to receive it. So if they're trying to compare products together, they may receive content from 3 different websites or something and see them in some form of comparison that those 3 websites independently didn't do. They didn't produce some comparison tool or anything like that, but the tool itself, the interface, whatever that screen may be, as we're starting to see, obviously, the screens, they'll start to produce it in that way. And that's where I think content engineering, what you're talking about, allows some of those things to happen. So you get to be one of the 3 considered because you've structured content in that appropriate way.
Absolutely. Because you may want to only consume content via videos, and then your robot will put together all that content into a video using the content they found. Whether it's, or you only want to see an infographic, they'll put those things together. You will get curated content. That's kind of the future.
And so that gets to then search intent, right? I mean, it starts to influence search intent, Ross. What do you think what's that going to look like?
Yeah, absolutely. So, and one thing Ron was sort of alluding to is, when mobile came about, people said, oh, is desktop search over? Is it dead? Is it going to go away? And a lot of people assume that it was. It's like, okay, well, now you have this thing in your pocket. You don't have to go to your laptop or your desktop computer to do the search anymore. But what actually happened is that people started doing new types of searches via their mobile device. So they're asking about location or taking directions to somewhere that they can drive, things like that. And what happened is actually that desktop remained pretty stable, and then mobile grew on top of that.
Yeah.
And it started to take more and more people's everyday lives and put more of that time spent online. And as we move towards voice, we're going to have more time spent online, but it's not going to be the same type of engaged screen experience that we're used to. And so there still very much will be desktop interactions. There will be mobile phone interactions, and voice is likely to grow on top of that with new intents, new situations where that's the better way to do things, where you couldn't use a laptop device before. Now you can interact via voice and stay connected. Yeah.
And so that's how people get to spend 36 hours a day on a device, something to that effect, because they've got many devices in front of them.
Have you been looking at my screen time report?
That's right. That's right. It's proactively was served to me by my virtual assistant.
I'm waiting for the glasses to come up, because I think that's really where that marriage of is your computer is talking to you in your ear, and your video, your monitor are your glasses.
Yeah.
And that's, so there again, it's another yet screen that we have to develop and think about.
Yeah. And it's just all enhancing. I think the one of the things you were talking about earlier is that idea of thinking of it like an assistant, and some of that is going to change a lot of the way this is doing that. Then layering AI and all this other stuff, it's all converging. I think when we talked about when mobile was a thing, people were talking about, the mobile agency or mobile who would do, whatever, build the mobile site. And I think the way we were thinking about it back then was the web is mobile. So it's still just the web. And I think that's what we're saying here is it's still content. So now it's still, people want to do things. They're looking for things. They want to buy things. And this is a way to engage, interact, where AI is probably that one thing that's probably a little different than everything else, because then it's getting proactive. It's changing a lot of stuff compared to the inputs or something like that. So this is such a fun conversation. I think there's a lot more to be had. And I know that we're going to discuss more of that because we got a forthcoming Voice First webinar. So if you want to register for that coming up, it's at reddoor.biz/learn. And while you're there, check out show notes from this episode. More, as always, subscribe to this show. Leave us a review on iTunes. But guys, thanks for joining us, Ross, Ron. Really appreciate it, and look forward to hearing more about this stuff in the halls of Red Door, as well as then on the webinar later. So thanks, guys.
Really appreciate it. Great to be here.
Great chatting with you.